this is the full Glacier rig that fits in super well to the crevasse rescue system that we teach. A different way to set up your Glacier rig while you're traveling, all it really means is that you're going to have a few more extra steps to transition from your Glacier rig into your full crevasse rescue situation. So this sets you up for success. It gives you all the tools you need so you don't have to fuck around with it too much. And that way, if you find yourself without one of these in some other situation, you'll hopefully remember how to get back to it. So 2 lockers through the knot, Alpine butterfly. I've got my waist prusik farther away going into one of them, doesn't matter which. And I've got my foot prusik daisy chained with a locking carabiner to my belay loop. That's the way I like to ride it. And then of course, the harness is totally set. I don't really need a helmet, but whoever's in the crack should have one. I've got all my extra rope, which in this case is most of the rope. And he didn't want to carry any. And then making sure whatever's over there is fine. So, when you do your, the other thing that I would have on me, I would have in my backpack, would be, I'd probably have my rescue cordelette, which I don't really need right now, but I would probably want it. And then I'm going to have a picket. So, when you guys go through this first round, you can do it body weight with somebody hanging off the edge, or you can do it with a backpack. Either way. In this case, we'll go backpack. I'm going to go backpack.
Dun, dun, dun. Kyle, look at the top. Whoa!
Wow. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to take my leg and I'm going to put it over the rope. So instead of pulling me sideways, it's going to be pulling me in the center. And that way, with that distribution of load, I've got picked out my steps really well, and then I've got my knees down, and I'm ready. I'm keeping my hips really low to the ground. The higher I go, the more the weight is going to pull me over backwards, right? So that's bad. So I want to keep my hips low. I'm also going to keep my ice axe at the ready. If it's set like this, that's okay. I'm going to be using it for stuff, so it's always going to be in my hands. If at some point I'm not using it, I want to take it off to the side and I want to set it so it doesn't slide. I know exactly where it is, and even better if it's like this, if something shifts, I can go for it and grab it, right? Because right now I am literally the sole anchor for my precious backpack. So keeping my hips low, especially when you have a lot of weight. Every inch that you lose, you can't get back. You can imagine that if I could actually just gain that, instead of building an anchor, I'm just gonna pull them out of the crack, right? So we're assuming that that's not gonna work. So self-arrest, good stance, take a deep breath, slow down. You're not in a hurry. This is a very, very classic example of slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? Make sure you do each step appropriately. Make sure you don't miss any steps, and always practice error correction. So if you're looking at something and it's not quite right, figure out why, okay? This is body weight. Like, this is somebody in the crack, and you want to make sure you know what's going on. So, first things first, right now I'm holding all of the load. Where do I want to get that load?
Onto an anchor.
Great. So I'm going to need to put one piece in. You can imagine pickets. Awesome. So I have this here. This is going to be my first anchor. These are stupid strong, right? So I want this to be my primary piece. I like that. I'm going to put it over here. Where I dig my first T-slot. Now if this is super hard and dense snow, in theory you could pound it in, but for 2 reasons we're going to do T-slots. One, because T-slots are bomb-proof, and we don't always know, like we don't have enough experience and we don't use vertically placed pickets often enough to build that experience yet. We've already dug tons of T-slots, right? And remember, with a live load on the bottom end, it's way better to be conservative, making sure it's super strong from the start. So, T-slots. If I'm here and something changes and I get dragged back, you can imagine that if I'm here and I'm digging a T-slot, and then suddenly I get pulled down here and I'm like, oh, I'm just going to continue with this one, it's going to be really hard. So I like to dig my first T-slot directly under my chest. This is the hardest part. This is the most physically difficult part, in the sense that it's the part where you have to make a move, you have to dig this T-slot and establish your anchor. All the while you're holding this incredibly uncomfortable thing off of your harness. So I'm generally going to try and do things like with my elbows down so I have two hands. The moment I start doing this, my body is starting to rise and I don't want to flip over backwards, so play conservative there. This one happens to already have the sling in the middle, but otherwise I'd have to move that. Sweet. Alright, so now I have my first piece. Before I do anything, I want to backfill it a little bit, just so it doesn't shift. You can imagine if I load it and something happens, suddenly I'm fighting that fall again. So I know it's set really well. Got the smiley face, it's not held up by the two ends. We've got an appropriate slot from the backfill it. Just this, once again, this isn't strength, it's positioning. It keeps it from shifting. You don't have to fill it all the way, but just enough to keep it from moving around. Now, here's the great part. This is where I was talking about your load. You can see it's pulling the whole thing down in between my legs, so it's kind of hard to see, kind of hard to deal with. I have this locking carabiner on top because I can still get to it really easily. If I have it trapped under here, if I clip it below, keeps it out of the way while I'm hiking, and then suddenly it's here and I'm like, I'm trying to do the reverse. Yeah, cool, got that. All right. Here's the other reason I keep a locking carabiner on my foot prusik. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip, if I can do this directly in, this is awesome. I clip it directly in, I take my axe, I set it as a backup, and I slowly move back. Lock it. Slowly move back so that the weight is hanging from my one piece. Not redundant yet, I'm the backup. But we're off to a good start. I'm more comfortable now. Okay. Now this is pretty cool because you can imagine that if I have a non-locking carabiner on here, I'm going to be doing this, and I'm going to be messing with stuff. I'm going to be finding a locker, and I'm going to be putting a locker in here, and I'm going to clip everything in. So this kind of saves you a step. You don't always have to rock the locker in there. I use a lightweight locker that I don't worry about, so I don't feel like I'm wasting weight or wasting resources. But otherwise it saves me a step. The other option is, you can imagine that while I'm here and I'm digging this underneath my chest instead of up high, it's a little closer, which means that this short distance will usually clip in pretty easily. Now, if, for whatever reason, I'm lower, like this, I've built it up there, I've shifted, something's happened, I've got this sweet anchor, but this isn't going to reach. So this is where the daisy chain comes in. You unclip it and just keep the two ends, and then you pull it out. And the whole thing's a lot longer now. It's redundant because you've got two pieces here. It's still on the rope with the prusik, and now it's a lot longer and I can reach much higher. Now you can imagine once I've locked that and I move back, now this whole thing is extended much, much farther. It's not bad, it's not a safety concern, but it does make things marginally more awkward. Just spreads things out a little bit. So if I can dig that first piece close and clip in short with my daisy chain foot prusik, I do. Makes things a little closer. So I'm just going to go back to that. This is locked, this is loaded. I'm free of the weight. I can take a deep breath. I'm still the backup, right? If that blows, I am the anchor, right? So keeping an axe close and simply being aware. Just remember that you're not off the hook yet. So, let's go this way. So now we can take a moment and we're going to readjust. So I'll take my pack off. I might have already taken my pack off to get that picket out. But either way, I'm going to take this off. remember, when you have a mountaineer's coil, how do you uncoil it? One at a time. Why do you do one at a time?
So you don't get tangled.
Yeah, you're going to get a huge cluster. If I just drop this and then pulled it all apart, it will turn into a knot. So I take the end. You can do it from this side or this side. It doesn't matter. In this case, I've got the end. I'm going to toss the end up there so I know where it is, just like we do when we're flaking. Now, while you're doing this, you can be like, think that you're wasting time while your buddy's down there getting wet and cold, freaking out a little bit. That said, you want to do this step well the first time, because undoing knots is a lot harder and a lot more time consuming than doing this. And I've just spent 30 seconds doing this. It's not that big of a time waster. It's not a waster
You
at
could
all.
also tell him what you're doing.
What was that?
You could also tell him what you're doing.
Yeah, if you can call down and communicate with them, absolutely. You'll be surprised at how hard it is to hear. But yeah, you can yell, totally. So right now, all of the weight is hanging on this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to back that up. I'm going to take this off because I might need this later. And the way I back it up is, instead of just this holding on the rope, I'm going to back it up with a locking carabiner, and I'm going to use the rope itself. And I'm going to make, I don't want to make it super tight, but I also don't want to put a bunch of slack in, right? If I tie a knot right here and clip this in, you can see there's kind of a bunch of slack right here. So you can see there's a bunch of slack right there. If this breaks, they're going to fall that far, right? So that's unnecessary. Like I said, you don't want to make it tight, but you don't need to add too much extra slack. Now you'll notice that I've clipped it into this carabiner instead of clipping it into this. Why have I done that? Any thoughts? Like, what's advantages, disadvantages?
Yeah, you can.
No, because this would still be in the carabiner. It would just be the difference between this carabiner up in here.
You can adjust it now without opening the master carabiner.
Okay, there's the key point. Master locking carabiner. This is the master locking carabiner. Once the master locking carabiner is on and loaded, can we open it? So the answer is no. You can never ever open your master locker. Just don't do it. You can't do it. If it's loaded, you can't open the carabiner. Straight up. So that being said, with this being locked and loaded and being the master carabiner, it's not going anywhere. So I can clip something into it, and I know that I'm not going to need that carabiner. It's not going to weirdly cross-load stuff. And it's going to separate these two, which would be good. So right now, this is our setup. Master locking carabiner, a locking carabiner with our backup, because through me goes the load, and then this is holding the whole load. All right, so what's my next, what do I need to do next? Where is this system not redundant? Okay, I've got one anchor, and then there's me, and at some point I'm going to need to do other stuff. So I need to back the anchor up. How can I do that? That's a little far. It's going to be really awkward, right? I could do it off to the side. What I really need is more space. This locking carabiner on a master locker with a fixed knot, this I can hang off of now, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself, big arm's length, figure 8 on a bite. Now this is cool. This is where the two locking carabiners come in. If I unclip one of these, am I still safe? Right, because a locking carabiner is still kosher by itself. Now this gives me the opportunity to, I need to take it off the rope, so I'm not clipping to that. Clip it in here and lock it. Now I'm redundant. I'm into the system once right here, and I'm into the system once here. This one's going to give me more space, so I can undo this one, right? Yes, true. So I can undo this one and I'm free. Now I don't have a moving room of 6 inches. I now have about 6 feet. I'm going to take this locking carabiner, I'm going to clip it back here, so I have other resources for moving back and forth. I'm going to worry about this later, and then this I'm also going to use later, so you just leave that there. So now I'm going to move up. I'm going to take, I carry a double length sling, partially for this purpose and partially because it's useful for other things. Now I have the carabiner on the end of it. This right now, this is okay because this is a locking carabiner. This is okay to be by itself. This is not. This is not redundant. So where do I need to put this carabiner?
Into the locking carabiner.
Exactly. So I need to clip it into the master carabiner like that. You can see now that this would be supported by 2 pieces. It's redundant. Now I can kind of measure, right? I'm going to pull off to the side a little bit. This is pretty close, and the bottom of this is unsupported, so if I pull it a little bit over here, I've got a little bit more, which is kind of cool. So I don't actually usually clip this in when I measure, I just kind of go like this. Great. I'll take this off because I'm going to use it. I'm going to dig my slot. Okay. A little up from the middle. Oh, I didn't do this here. All the way to the bottom. Set this right here. I'm actually going to try and... When I set it in the middle, it's not pushed up against this wall. This is where that undercut comes in a little bit. Let it come right up against the base of that wall. Smiley face. Set that with the pick down. Pretty good. Now, before I backfill that, I'm going to test it. A little short. Sweet. Got it, and backfill. All right. Flip. Sweet. I've got a redundant anchor supporting my master locker, which is locked, and the system's all back up. So I've transferred the load completely to a redundant snow anchor. That is not going to go anywhere. That is a really strong anchor. That takes a load off of me, right? Now what should I do?
And give yourself more lead, use your chest button to go backwards.
Great, perfect. So now that I'm going to go down there, I'm going to give myself more. I'm going to kind of estimate a little bit. That'll probably be about good. Now this is, go ahead.
Go ahead. I apologize.
No worries. So this is where the double carabiners make a lot of sense. I have 2 options. One really easy option to keep myself in safe is to lock myself in, and I can undo this one, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm always safe, I'm always redundant. I've got a lot of slack in the system right now, but I'm about to get rid of it by moving down there. The other option, and you can do this with the locker, non-locker setup for your Glacier rigs, is I'm in here like this. This is locked. Now I unlock it, and I take this, and I clip it in. I'm not actually hanging on it. It's not ideal that I'm opening this locker, but I'm not compromising the strength of it per se, because I'm not actually using the strength of it yet. I'm just using its security. So I clip the second one in, put it past the gate, and then pull that one out. So you can do that with a single locker. The double locker just makes things a little bit easier. I'll take this knot out. because I don't need it, and I don't want extra knots in the system, right? If you're actually loading a system and you have a knot stuck in the system, one, it's going to get really tight and make it hard to undo, and two, it could totally get in the way. So now what I want to do is I want to clip into this, which is kind of handy that I can do. I'll do it with this. If I clip into it short like this works fine. It's a little close. Some people have longer prussiks. If Dylan used his super short prussic, it'd be really awkward. But that would be, you deal with it. You can do this if you really want. You can take this, because this is already supporting you, throw a clove in, and clip in here. That gives you a longer leash, which is kind of nice, but that's a little long. I'm going to have my hand on the prussic, so I wouldn't have it that long, but that's another option. I wouldn't really worry about that too much. And what I'm doing is great. So when I'm coming down here, I buried my ice axe, so I don't have another ice axe right now, but I have my backpack or something, and I want to take that with me. There are probably no other crevasses in here. Probably would have fallen into that one first than this one. But you just want to, if you have an ice axe, you can plunge around and make sure there's nothing hidden. You want to bring something with you because you're going to pad the lip, which I'll talk about in a second here. So I'm going to kind of scooch my way along, make sure that there's no other crevasses. I've got this backup, this is cool. I've got my backpack or something with me. And when I say something, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about here for a second, what you're going to do with it. So get to the edge. With the press, you can imagine I could slide this all the way up there, and then I could tip over the edge, which isn't going to do anybody any good. So sliding this back here, engaging it, and then I'll actually pull on it a little bit. That's a super solid anchor, and I want this to be engaged so it doesn't slip. Now I can't quite see over the edge, so I'm just going to bump it down a little bit. Ooh, backpack's pretty far down there. Cool. So I'm securing myself, and the big thing right here, this answers your question, Sean, I can communicate with my anti-climber. The guy who's down there, I can talk to him. Make sure he's okay. If he's unconscious or needs medical help, that changes things significantly, and I wouldn't worry about that right now. Right now, we're just worried about getting them out. Talk to them, make sure they're okay, see if they can do anything for them, see if they need anything immediately, you can lower it to them, something like that. But in short, you're here. This edge of snow, remember all of that friction we had yesterday while we were ice climbing? It just dug right in. You want to try and minimize that. This is pretty chill. It's only dug in a couple inches. You can imagine how much deeper it'll dig with 150 or 200 pounds of climber down there. And that's not because you weigh that much, but because with your weight and the force, the dynamic fall force, it'll dig in really deeply. So you want to make sure that you can clear this out. If this is going through snow, it's going to be a lot of friction. So with this backup right here, I'm going to talk to my climber down there and say, hey, put on your helmet, pull up your hood. I'm going to be kicking a lot of snow down on top of you. No hard feelings. Because what I'm going to do is right here, I got a hand, and I'm going to kick, I'm prepping the lip, as it's called. I'm prepping the lip. So I'm going to kick all of the snow off. Usually use your feet just because this is a good solid position and your legs are strong. And there's usually a lot of snow. And you do it until you can see the rope. Now you can imagine as well that when we start hauling this, you're going to introduce a lot more force, and what's that going to do with the rope in the snow?
It's digging further.
It's just going to dig in farther. So what I want to do is after I prep the lip, you want to pad the lip, which for the sake of the activity, may I have another ice axe? Attach this. It doesn't have to be super complicated, it's just you don't want to lose it. You put your non-locker on the end of it, and you're going to clip this to the rope. Come back down to the edge. Make sure that's tight so you don't go over. And you're going to take the axe and you're going to slide it underneath the rope. You can do the same thing with the backpack. You guys may have heard me talking about vector forces. The fact is even though there's a lot of load, you can grab this and pull up pretty easily. More than enough to make room. Then you put it there, and of course there's a lot of tension, the rope pulling down into the snow there. So in order to get it as far down towards the apex, if this is the rollover that the rope is going, You want to get it not up here at the top because the rope will cut in below, but and not over here because the rope will cut in up top and it also fall all the way to the climber. So you want to put it right about here, right on the outside. That's usually good. And a good way to do that is setting it and then getting your feet on both sides and just kind of working it down a little bit. All right. So you can see how the rope is running over it. And then if possible, I'm going to spin it with that pick is there. So you have one less sharp thing. Now the adze, of course, is going to be in the way as your climber comes up and over, but that's less of an issue than the pick, and the pick will provide a little security, keeping the rope, keeping this from moving around. So I've prepped the lift with a backpack or with the ice axe, and I've got this tethered in, so whenever the climber comes up, it doesn't fall willy-nilly, and if it shifts, it doesn't get lost. So now I can come back up here. My climber's okay. My anchor's built. What's left to do? Haul. All right. So this is the transition that's going to take us right back into the lesson that we had yesterday. I'm going to undo this. I can leave the carabiner on. I'm going to take the rope that comes from the anchor, the same one that I'm clipped into, and I'm going to clip it through. Right? Super simple transition. I'm free from that. I can stand up, that out of the way. So I really gave myself way more than enough to get to the edge there. Now I've got, what's that called now? Tractor. What do we recognize? What's this look like?
Beginning of the Z.
Yeah, the beginning of the Z. What is the problem? No. Can I haul on this right now? No. Why? We got two fixed knots in the system. Now this one is easy because all I've got to do is untie it. If this shifts down a little bit in the process of transferring the load in the very beginning, this knot can be a little finicky. Pop that. Now I've got some extra slack. Now, you guys remember this transition? How do I turn this into a free running loop without taking the knot completely out? So I have two options, and this is sort of the same as that transition on your belay loop. I can put in another carabiner. I can put the rope through it, and now I can undo this one, right? Because with the carabiner in, this is still in the system, so it's going to get caught on that, right? Versus nothing at all, and I have no backup. All of the load is on the cordelette. You need to make sure that you have the rope in the system. So this is the one system, using a second carabiner and taking this one out. And then of course if you're running short of carabiners, you can also just do this. Undo that. Keep this. Does this need to be a locking carabiner right now?
No, it's not your master.
What was that?
It's not your master.
It's not my master, so it doesn't mean it has to be redundant by itself. A locker is the equivalent of two non-lockers, so it's redundant. One non-locker by itself is not redundant. But between one non-locker and this, that's two pieces. That one down there, does that one have to be a locker?
No.
Nope, because it's part of the rope system backed up by the cordelette. So none of the hauling system has to be a locker. I happen to have a locker on there. I left it there. I could have switched it out. It doesn't really matter. So now, what do I have going on here? You guys should recognize this.
This is Z.
Yeah. Pull up the extra slack. I've got a free running. I'll lock this just for funsies because if you got a locker, you may as well. Free flowing Z drag. Now I've got a lot of slack in between me and that, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come a little bit closer and I'm going to get rid of this slack because I don't like slack. Slack means if something weird happens, there's a lot of slack that can be absorbed before the load is transferred. I don't have a second carabiner, so put myself in short, put it back over the gate, flip it, lock it right away, undo this, Get that out of the way. Now I've got a couple options. I can start hauling just like this. I can also come back down here, unlock that, and bring it all the way down. That gives me even more throw before I get back up there. So I've got a couple options. I can hand over hand it using the guns. I can also use my body. Just, you can just lean into it like this and pull from your harness, or you can step over it and then walk forward. So that means that the load is pretty straightforward. It's not going to pull you sideways. It makes it generally a stronger position. If this isn't working, I can get down on all fours. I can pull, and then I can also oh, I put it in wrong. Ah! Okay, you guys see what's happening here? So what's wrong with this picture?
Your loop, you didn't tend your load capture.
No, the whole thing got slipped.
Yeah.
It got sucked through. I didn't see that happen. Alright, so that's cool. I can't get back up there, so I'm just going to loosen this. Slide this back up so I can fix this. So you can see how this whole thing got sucked through. And this is what happens when a prusik runs into the carabiner itself. It's self-tending. So in this case, what happened is this whole thing got sucked through the system and onto the other side. So now, that makes more sense, right? We've got the load line coming from the backpack all the way through, and it's being held here. If what I had before is based on the way that I had been pulling the rope through, it sucked this through, and you can see how I'm pulling the load here, right? But because I didn't tend it, it got pulled all the way through. Now we've got the load line right here, and there's nothing on it to capture the load. So this is why you need to tend it. Get this through, get down. All right. So now if I can hand over hand, I can just pull, tend, pull, tend, pull, tend, pull, tend. That's kind of cool. All right, now if I do this technique and I start pulling, and you can see how I introduce a lot of slack really quickly, I want to make sure that I want to be back at the anchor by now, so I can tend this so it doesn't get sucked through.
What if you weren't? You would just keep pulling, let it get sucked through, and then...
No, you're trying to avoid that. Don't let it get sucked through. Yeah.
So what happens if you're pulling and the prusik is basically at the fixed gate and you're not there? Meaning you're 2 feet short and you
If
can't
it's
reach it.
loaded, sometimes the carabiner itself will tend it, or you can just readjust that
Slide
and
that up.
go back, unload it, let the rope hang on the prusik, and then fix that. Something else you can do is, so I've got my Z-drag here. I have this thing, the prusik. It's not being tended. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this side is unloaded, right? There's slack in here because all of the load is on this right now. And as long as I don't undo any of it, it shouldn't go anywhere. So I'll clip this in. This is a non-locker. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's part of the hauling system and it's redundant because the cartlet has it backed up. Get that out of the way. Now look at this. As I pull up, the belay device is going to tend the prusik, and then when I release the load, the friction of the prusik will simply grab the rope and come down. Now, of course, this is kind of a pain because I'm going to pull up here and pull, and then every time I let go, I'm going to lose 8 inches, 10 inches. That kind of sucks. But I can always do this for a really big haul, and then I can tend it with my fingers. And so if I do a really big haul coming all the way down here, I don't have to worry about tending that until I get up there. So here, pull, and then I can also grab this one And I can pull with me as I climb. And then I get up here and I tend it. And then I won't lose as much. Okay? Alright, so 3 to 1 with the tending belay device. Unfortunately, this isn't enough. What else can I do? How do I transition this into our next level of mechanical advantage? What's our next level?
6 to 1.
6 to 1. Where do I start with a 6 to 1?
End of the rope.
End of the rope, what do I do with it?
Tie it into your master carabiner.
Which carabiner? Where do I connect this? End of the rope to what? You connect the end of the rope to the anchor. You're not worried about the hauling system quite yet. So, locker, and I can connect it to the master locker. No conflict there. Now I've got a fixed line coming down, and what do I do with this to make my 6 to 1? So right here, this is where the clove hitch comes in. And then I run this and clip it right through there. So now you can see your stacked systems. You've got the 3 to 1, the Z, 1, 2, 3, and then what's pulling on, this is extra, right? That just kind of goes away. And then we've got, what's this one? Coming from the fixed anchor down here and back up, what's that? That's a 2 to 1. So the 2 to 1 pulling on a 3 to 1 makes a
6 to 1.
6 to 1. How much rope do I have to pull to get that thing to come up 1 foot?
A lot.
6 feet, plus what?
Friction.
Plus friction, plus
Stretch.
plus rope stretch. Exactly. So I can pull on this, and that's your 6 to 1. You pull it all the way up. This is tending, which is kind of cool. And then when I'm up here, I can do this so I don't lose any more. This, of course, is running into this. Do you remember the 2 ways that I can readjust this system? Which 2 pieces can I move that will allow me to have more throw? More
Clove hitch.
Clove hitch and then tractor and the waist up.
Clove hitch and the tractor. So I can slide this down. I don't need to get that close to the edge, safety's sake. Now, I've pulled this down far enough that the clove hitch is pretty close to this. But let's say that's not the case, and the clove hitch is all the way up here. You guys are right. I don't even have to untie it. I can just pull slack through. So now it's shorter, and now I've got the same setup. If, for some crazy reason, the 61 is still difficult, I'm just going to readjust it long. I'm not able to pull it with my arms, which is crazy. It would never happen, but then I can throw a knot in here, tie myself in short, clip it in here. So instead of just pulling with my arms, what am I doing?
Pulling with your waist, legs.
Pulling with my body weight. And then I can pull like a bull. 10, cool. So this whole time he has obligingly been rising. It's pretty easy from wherever he is at the bottom to most of the way to the top. There's not a lot of change in there. At the lip, things get really complicated because not only is he getting pulled up, he's also getting pulled over. And if you haven't prepped the lip well, that rope is going through the snow, which means the rope is pulling his hips. So where are his hips going to go?
Into the snow.
They're going to go straight into the snow. And it has happened that people's hips have been broken because the enthusiastic rescuers said, hey, it's getting harder, I'm just going to add more mechanical advantage, I'm just going to add people, I'm just going to pull harder. If things change, if things get really hard, yes, you can make it a little easier on yourself, but you always want to go and check on your climber because they are more important than how easy this is. It doesn't matter if you're working your ass off, you want to make sure that they're safe. So you talk to them, see how they're coming up. They like to know what's going on. They like it when they're going up. If there's a big pause, go, hey, say, hey, I'm just working on transitioning right now. I'm working on getting you up, like keeping them in the loop, right? There's nothing like being in the bottom of a crevasse that makes you feel like you're out of the loop. So make sure you check on them. When you get up to the top, when they come up towards the edge, you're going to increase that communication. It's going to be easier to talk to them because you're not yelling, so far. And then of course it's going to be trying to get them to help. So they're going to be able to start getting their arms up and over. You can tell them about the ice axe so they don't find it by accident when they pull on it into their face. They can use it to hold on to. Make sure that they keep it when they come up over the edge. And then you can see that if I'm pulling with this system right now, so I'm pulling with a 6-to-1, and let's say they get up to the edge, I don't really need a 6-to-1 anymore. I can just go right here. Now I'm pulling a 3-to-1. Yep, and then they pop over the edge, which is incredibly convenient because my 3-to-1's running out, and now I can just grab this. I can pull that in. Now, the difference between pulling this in and pulling that is being tended, which means there's no slack between the anchor and them. If I'm just pulling them in like this, there's going to be a lot of slack by the time they get up here, and that can be a consideration. Just recognize that that can happen. So I've got my 3-to-1, and I just felt it get hard, so they're close to the edge. You've got a lot of rope. Like, this looks like it's really complicated, and if at some point, I'm just tossing this off to the side. Because there's nothing like a cluster of ropes to make things confusing. So I'm going to come down here, see if I can get close to the edge. Oh, look, my pack's right there, or they're right there. I can also help with that vector pull. That will change. Instead of the rope pulling directly along the snow, I'll actually be pulling up on them a little bit. Up right there. Hey, come on up. I'm probably not going to give them a hand. Why not?
If they fall, you go with them?
Yeah, I mean, right now I've got a good backup here, but this is only because I have the 6-to-1. I'll usually have more slack in the system, and also the fact is that I am not as strong as this, and me holding onto their hands has the potential for something slipping, and then there's slack in the system. So I'm going to talk to them, but I'm going to help them with the rope. I'm going to tell them about the ice axe, and then I'm going to help. I'm not going to put them back down. I'm going to pull the system and let the anchor tend the prusik, so as they come up over the edge, they're protected. Because as we know, when we got to the top of those ice climbs, the edge is hard. Not only are you the most tired, but that change in angle is really kind of difficult. Come all the way up, and then you can help them into the anchor. You'll see how this came with, because it's clipped into the rope, so that's kind of cool. And then it all gets really complicated right here. I had a 3-to-1, then I had a 6-to-1, and then I'm pulling them up, and then they come over the edge, and I don't necessarily have the time to manage everything and keep everything else organized, but that's okay because you've got them safe. You get them up here near the anchor, you can tie them off short, they're out of the crevasse. You've rescued them. And that's it.